making sure people can get to the care they need. Find more health solutions at floridablue.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Dan Scanlon in for Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, a former local journalist plays a prominent role in a 4-part docuseries now streaming on Hulu. It chronicles a 1994 cold case about a missing Arkansas college student. Then Social Security turns 89, so how is the federal program planning to keep evolving to meet the needs of future generations? And a live recording of a podcast aims to spark cultural conversations to move the margins. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also tag us on Facebook, Instagram, or X. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Health officials in Gaza say the number of Palestinians killed in the war has topped 40,000 people. The Gaza war was triggered when Hamas-led militants attacked Israel on October 7th, killing more than 1,200 people. NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi reports the increased Palestinian death toll comes on the same day as a new round of ceasefire talks are scheduled to begin in Doha, Qatar.
About 2% of the 2.3 million Palestinians living in Gaza have been killed in the war, according to Gaza health officials. The death toll of 4,005, which includes many women and children, does not take into account Palestinians missing or stuck under the rubble of buildings destroyed by Israeli strikes. Gaza health officials do not distinguish between combatants and civilians killed. The death toll was announced as international mediators begin talks in Doha today to try and get Hamas and Israel to strike a ceasefire deal. Officials want to resolve issues to reach an agreement that would lead to a hostage and prisoner exchange, the return of Palestinian civilians to North Gaza, and eventually the end of the war. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Former President Donald Trump laid out his economic policies yesterday during a speech in Asheville, North Carolina. As NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben reports, Trump focused some of his remarks on tax proposals.
Trump promoted his policies to end taxes on tips as well as on Social Security benefits.
With your vote, I will end this injustice, and I will always protect Social Security and Medicare for our great seniors, just as I did for 4 incredible years. There was never any talk about doing anything.
Economists have criticized both policies for being of only limited benefit to many Americans. For example, many who receive tips already do not earn enough to pay income taxes. Trump's rival, Vice President Kamala Harris, has her own version of a proposal to eliminate taxes on tips. Meanwhile, ending taxes on Social Security benefits could further jeopardize that program, whose trust fund is projected to run dry in 2033. Danielle Kurtzleben, NPR News.
Trump will hold a news conference this afternoon at his golf club in New Jersey. President Biden and Vice President Harris will campaign together today in Maryland to talk about economic policy. They're expected to promote the administration's announcement today on lower costs for the 10 most expensive drugs in the Medicare program. Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra says the Medicare program would have saved $6 billion last year with the negotiated prices, and beneficiaries would have saved even more on out-of-pocket costs.
On top of those $6 billion, another $1.5 billion would have been saved by the actual Medicare beneficiaries. There are about 9 million beneficiaries in Medicare who use these 10 drugs, and they would have saved money because they have to put money out of their own pocket to cover the additional cost of these drugs beyond what Medicare pays.
He spoke to NPR's Morning Edition. This is NPR.
And you're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. Sunday, August 25th, the city of Jacksonville will unveil a permanent marker honoring the victims of the racist mass shooting at a Dollar General store on Kings Road in the Newtown community nearly a year ago. The marker was approved by a 17-0 vote during Tuesday's city council meeting. Councilmember Jacoby Pittman, who introduced the bill, says she was honored by the council's support for the marker.
We cannot forget things that cause hate and tragedy in our community, and that we also remember that those families are still healing.
August 26th is the one-year anniversary of the shooting by a white gunman that took the lives of 3 black people. The marker's unveiling is set for 3 p.m. the day before at Kings Road and Alameda Street. If you're looking for a new job, CareerSource Northeast Florida is holding a virtual job fair where you can apply for virtual and hybrid job openings with nearly 20 local employers. Some of those employers include Community First Credit Union, Life South Community Blood Centers, and Wounded Warrior Project. The virtual event runs from 10 this morning until 1 this afternoon, and you can register at CareerSourceNortheastFlorida.com. Today in Jacksonville, we'll have partly sunny skies this afternoon, highs in the upper 80s, so it'll be a little bit cooler than the heat that we've been feeling for the past couple of days. It'll be breezy as well. Wind gusts as high as 23 miles per hour at times. There is a high rip current risk out at the local beaches tonight, lows in the mid-70s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Cigna Healthcare, a health benefits provider that advocates for better health through every stage of life. Learn more at Cigna.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
And good morning, I'm Dan Scanlon filling in for Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, a new ABC News docuseries chronicles the 1994 case of a missing Arkansas college student. It's a mystery. A former local journalist says it has stayed with her for the last 30 years. Later in the program, a live podcasting event that aims to move the margins through some candid public conversation. But first, a former local journalist who I've had the pleasure of being on the front lines with over the years played a prominent role in a 4-part docuseries now streaming on Hulu. It's called At Wit's End, and that's WITT, Wit's End, The Hunt for a Killer. It follows the disappearance of a Fort Smith, Arkansas college student, 19-year-old Melissa Witt, who went missing from a bowling alley in 1994. Joining me is that former local journalist, Charlene Shirk, whose initial reporting on the case actually prodded police to investigate Witt's disappearance. And we also have Devon Parks, executive producer and director of the docuseries At Wit's End, joining us from Arkansas. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm wonderful. And Charlene, you and I go back a long ways, and we've covered many a case and story together. But let me talk about your beginning. You talk about it. Trust me, I watched the miniseries last night. My wife and I were actually just pulled right in to it.
Devon and his team did a remarkable job.
I'll get to that later because I have
great job.
I have been that reporter like you talking about a cold case on some of these, and never have I seen one done so well. But how did you get into the business that I'm still in?
Back in the day?
Yeah.
I got an internship at First Coast News. And the minute I walked in that door, I was hooked. I was the weekend intern, and I just never left. I started applying for every job they had. Didn't matter if it was news director or whatever. I'm like, at some point they can only say no so many times to me. And I was so lucky that they hired me as an associate producer. And for folks who may not be, kind of familiar with what that role is, it's entry level in the newsroom. It's ripping the scripts, rolling the teleprompter, answering the phones, filling in on the assignment desk for dinner breaks. And I was so lucky. I had the opportunity to work with, our now Mayor Donna Deegan and Marsha Ladendorf, who was there at the time, and, Jeannie Blaylock, who is still there, and great investigative reporters, Winston Dean, Michael Dillon. I mean, a lot of these names should be familiar to folks who've been
I worked with them.
Jacksonville for a while, and Sue Yanello and Angelique Proctor. I had those examples in front of me. And so when I had the opportunity to start, kind of, make some resume tapes and get some experience and send them out. I mean, those were the people that I had as my examples. And so those were the folks I was looking to emulate as I started my career as a new reporter in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
So you reported in Jacksonville. What are some of the memorable things that you covered in Jacksonville?
So I was, I like I said, I was kind of behind the scenes for the first 2 years, and then went and worked in Arkansas for 2 years, Tulsa, Oklahoma for another 2 years, and was lucky enough to be hired back to Jacksonville by Kevin Brennan, who was the news director at the time. I credit him so much for helping me, continue my career here in my hometown, and became a reporter and then a weekend anchor. I used to roll the teleprompter for Mayor Donna Deegan back in the day.
So those of us in the business know that you cannot usually start in a high market, and Jacksonville's always been a something level 50 market. So here you are working behind the scenes at First Coast News, and the bug had bit, and I guess you said, I want to go and report. I want to cover stuff. I want to be part of a community. So how did Arkansas show up?
My goal was I'm going to send 5 resume tapes out a week until I get a job. And Fort Smith, Arkansas reached out to me, and they were interested. We did an interview, and I remember I came into the news station and I went right to Marsha Ladendorf, and because she was, my mentor, giving me some feedback. And I said, Marsha, I got a job offer. And she said, take it. And I said, I didn't even tell you where it was. She goes, it doesn't matter. You got to start somewhere. Just take it. And you mentioned the market size of Jacksonville. Fort Smith, Arkansas was 115. So it was, it was kind of, it wasn't 238. So at least it allowed me the opportunity to reasonably work my way back to Jacksonville, which is a 50-ish market.
And obviously, right time, right place for many things that you covered there. This was not just a cops and robbers, local Christmas party coverage community. You got to do some stuff there too, not including the Witt case.
Well, in a small market, you get to do everything. You shoot yourself, in terms of recording, filming, editing. I even tried my hand, filled in, produced, realized I can't do that. I can't time a show. So that's not going to be for me. Yeah, I couldn't time a show to save my life. So we'd either be, have a lot of time left, or I'd be rushing them to wrap. So, but reporting, and I anchored. I got the opportunity to anchor as well there in Fort Smith. And it was a great opportunity. I learned a lot about agricultural news stories. I learned a lot about Native American, our Native American history and stories that impacted them. Learned a lot about, small government, and then obviously the police beat as well.
And many reporters who are working in TV stations can get to hold on to a case. You tell the news director, the producer, I'd like to stick with this. And obviously the Witt case is one that you stuck with. So you became the Witt expert. You became the go-to, the listen to, the watch person for this.
Well, I think a good news director sees the passion in a reporter when they come back from covering a story, and you can see it in their eyes. Similar thing with, Scott Spiker here in Jacksonville. I went and I covered his classmates had gone to a reunion and just started talking about him and said, what happened to him? And they decided that they were going to find out. And the minute I talked to them, I'm like, well, I'm in this for the ride too. I want to find out. And I followed that story even all the way to Washington, D.C. when we went out there for the Rolling Thunder March, and people really hadn't been aware of him. And then when they started talking about him, by the end of that weekend, he became basically what everybody talked about. And I'm so grateful that I got to see that case to its resolution when they found his remains.
And then there's Melissa Witt, who initially this was a missing person case, and you were...
Well, initially it wasn't a missing person.
No, she wasn't even
case.
a missing person yet, but you had this gut feeling there was something more to it, maybe because you'd been in a larger market. And how did that develop over the first week or two until the police started making it known that, hey, we have something here?
Well, I was the weekend reporter, and I came in Saturday morning, and I saw this missing persons flyer on the producer's desk, and I asked the producer, I said, what is this? Because you walk in the door, you have to find your story for the day. Nobody says, very rarely do they say, here's your story for the day. You've got to go find it. And I saw that, and I just, first thing you always do, and Dan, is has a missing persons, report been filed? And she had already called, she had done her due diligence, and she said, no, it hasn't been filed. but her friends are looking for her. And I just, I looked at that picture and my mother has always raised me to say, this is a parent's worst nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called the friends, I called the number, I connected with the friends. They were out handing flyers. I spoke with them, I interviewed them. And just everything about this told me that this is not a young woman who picked up and took off, right? This was before social media where people, young girls met people on the internet and, then they would take off with them. This was before all of that. So this was definitely something that I don't know. I just looked at that and I thought this girl did not take off. She did not run away. And by talking to the friends, and so I that same day I went back to the police station just to check in with any officers there to say, hey, any update on the case. And she hadn't even been entered in that system where they put the driver's license, your tag number in, so that if somebody sees the car in the tag, they report it as someone who's they're be on the lookout, the BOLO. And so I remember sitting there, and back in the day, you could actually go and talk to people sitting on the dispatch. You can't do that now. And I showed them the poster. They weren't even aware of it. And I said, well, are you going to enter her information in there? And, they were kind of like, well, maybe, I don't know. And I said, well, if it's okay, we're just going to hang out here and wait for you to do that so we can get that on camera. Partly that was me trying to get her information in the system, and we were able to get that recorded.
And here's the passion, because it's obvious that in the next few weeks you have a lot of reporting, and that means a lot of video is archived. A lot of people are seeing this, and that is probably what Devon Parks saw and heard about. There was a gold mine, Devon, of information for you to dig into, because it looks like there's raw tape in there. So let's introduce Devon Parks, founder of Mad Possum Pictures and the director of this docuseries. Devon, here I am assuming things. How did you get involved? How did you hear about this case?
Yeah, look, in a similar passion with Charlene, growing up in the area and wanting to be connected, wanting to be involved. Unfortunately, I grew up in this area and just knew very, very well about the case of Melissa Witt, and also the corresponding case that's often related to Melissa's case of Morgan Nick. And there were two very infamous abduction cases in this area. So I was aware of this name and Melissa's story somewhat all growing up. And it wasn't until I was looking for ways to bring these stories to an elevated level that Charlene and I got connected. Charlene and I actually connected first on the Morgan Nick documentary that we did that aired in 2023 on Hulu as well. And when I first spoke with Charlene, her name was given to me by another local reporter here who said, look, Charlene covered a lot of these missing person cases when she was here. You should talk with her first. And we talked extensively about Morgan's case, and Charlene covered different elements of that and got to know her mother really well. But one of the things that Charlene said to me several years ago when we had first started on the Morgan Nick case was, the case that really consumed me, that hangs with me so much today, was the Melissa Witt case. And at the time, we had no plans to dive further into that case, but I always remembered that, and Charlene and I stayed in touch. And when Morgan Nick's case evolved and rolled into what ended up being the Melissa Witt case with some of the investigative elements, I called up Charlene and said, hey, I think we have an opportunity here. And she basically dove in with both feet on the ground, and she came and offered us really just an element of the story that we couldn't have provided otherwise, with Melissa not being with us, with Melissa's mother not being with us, and Charlene having that personal connection with her mother, Marianne. And then, of course, Charlene's amazing journalistic abilities and her ability to tell a story on camera. It really provided such a unique aspect, such a unique voice in this space of true crime that so many people are attracted to. But we really hope to be able to tell the personal side of the story in a unique way, and Charlene really was able to provide that for us.
Well, Devon, it got me hooked last night, my wife and I, and I'll tell you what amazed me the most, and I have been the reporter in some of these documentaries over the years about cases I've covered. you had amazing access, it looks like, to the police departments there. You also spent some time and investigation in reproducing the scenes. You found the exact car and had a duplicate license plate made. The details, sometimes if they're wrong, they detract from a story. The details were so right. How did you manage to get all of those details right and get the access to a police department or investigators, which we sometimes don't get?
Yeah, look, our approach to a story like this is you want to really be able to provide an element or an aspect or a story in general that is new, that is refreshing, that is also captivating to your viewer. And embarking on this true crime genre with our entire team, my team at Mad Possum, my executive producers Luigi Armstrong and Elise Sater, and then greater at Scott Free Productions. We wanted to differentiate the way that we tell these stories of these victims, and so one of the things that we insisted on doing was providing an element that is unique to this. And fortunately, I had spent years on working on Morgan Nick's case, developing relationships with law enforcement, with some of the local and federal agents that are working these cases in this area. And it was important for me to show what that behind the veil access looks like, to be the fly on the wall in these scenarios, which I would say 95% of our viewers have never seen before. And as I got to know them, I realized what it was that I was wanting to convey on screen. So the access alone in Still Missing Morgan and also At Wit's End, which are tied together in unique ways, is one of its defining elements. It's very different than your traditional true crime, but that in itself is really what we were going for. And when it comes to detail, when it comes to the scale that we wanted to produce this on, I tip my hat to every member of our team. We work with some unbelievable artists in recreating these elements down to the finest detail. And may that be the car, may that be the police cars that we have to rebuild from the ground up to match that 90s time period, and our art department who places evidence exactly in these recreations as it was seen in the photos. Those are very important details to convey to the viewer, to convey to anybody who may need to see those things. And it's also a testament to the artists that we work with. You know, we strive to bring stories like this to the highest level, and for the viewer not only to watch, but also to be completely engrossed in. And I'm very proud of the people that I work with who are able to bring those elements to fruition.
Well, as a journalist who has been, like Charlene, under that camera with somebody like you, asking me questions to get information about what I covered, I applaud what I saw there. If you're just joining us, we're talking about a new docuseries featuring local reporter Charlene Shirk and her work on the Melissa Witt case. You can join the conversation live on air calling 904-549-2937. Email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or reach out on social media. For both of you, I loved what I was watching last night on this show. It premiered about a week or so ago. Has there been any updates, any tips on this cold case that could lead to whoever killed Miss Witt? Either one of you?
I would defer that to Devon. I'm so grateful to see so much conversation on Facebook and so many people now learning of her story, as well as, I've seen it written up in multiple publications from People Magazine to Newsweek. I mean, this is an answer to a prayer. And when I shared with Devon that this is the case that stuck with me because, Colleen Nick, Morgan's mother, there's a Morgan Nick Foundation. There are many efforts. She works diligently to keep her daughter's story going. And in fact, I still have, I think it was on her birthday, they did a big pink balloon release, and they put these little laminated cards at the end of the balloon string with her name and information and picture and when she was last seen. I still have one of those laminated cards on the bulletin board above my computer at my desk. I look at Morgan Nick's picture every single day, but I know that there are people out there looking for her. Her mother is keeping her story alive. With Morgan, there wasn't anyone after Marianne. And if you look at Marianne in that story, she was a very kind person, and I don't know that she shook the trees like Colleen did. I think she was, her daughter had passed away, so I think at that point she just wanted to move, as she mourned her daughter for the rest of her life. And the police would give her updates from time to time. I felt like, over the 30 years, there was no voice for Melissa anymore. And so I was just beyond grateful to have this opportunity to work with Devon and his team. And I know that we want to talk with Devon about any leads, but to watch those investigators in his piece brought me to tears. I was so profoundly grateful for them and their diligence and their passion and their commitment to finding her killer.
That gravestone sequence, and that's all I'll say, stopped me in my tracks. So, Devon, tell us, is there some news? Is there some warmth to this cold case since this premiered?
Yeah, as far as specifics, I don't know specifics. What I do know is we've stayed in close touch with the investigators and all members of the cold case team that we followed for the past several years, and they're beyond grateful as well, because there's just been a public response to that. And I think that there's a misconception that when things like this happen, when a public response is put out there, or a public request for information, that it just falls flat, it just dies in the water. In fact, and I can say this with experience now, a couple of years later with the Morgan Nick case, when this information goes out on such a large scale, it's not just that it reaches corners of the world that it would have never reached before. It also it penetrates, it saturates this area where these crimes happened, and it's just this re-energization of the people in the area who may have information that they haven't given, that they need to come forward with. And I can say that a lot of times you think that it doesn't go anywhere. It does, and there's been an outpouring of information that's come in, a lot of good information. When you see these investigators start working these old files and have to look for these leads that they're going to go down, it's times like these when the phone is ringing and emails are coming in, when energy gets picked up quite a bit, because there are things that they know they can point directly to, and they can start working now. And I know that they're receiving a lot of those phone calls now. I wish I had more specific information, but hopefully we know that sooner than later.
But maybe somebody remembers 21 years later seeing this. I drove by that bowling alley and I saw something happen next to a white car. Let's take a question from Jerry in St. Augustine. Jerry, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning. If you can just briefly explain what the story is. I understand a young woman went missing, but are there any other parts of the story? And I understand that, it's on a television, or it's on Hulu, but many people don't have access to those formats. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it starts in a parking lot, right?
So Melissa Witt, she was a college student in Arkansas, and she went to school, went home, changed, had an after-school job, went home, changed her clothes. There was a note from her mother that said, "Hey, meet me at the bowling alley tonight. I'll buy you a burger. Mom bowled in a church league." So Melissa goes to the bowling alley, parks her car, never makes it into the bowling alley. Her friends, she doesn't come home that night. Her mother is panicked, starts calling her friends, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. No one has seen her. She calls the police. The police come out there in the middle of the night. She tells them what happened. And then an officer says, have you had any arguments or anything? And she said, "Oh, we got in a little argument this morning." The argument was basically over that, Melissa had needed an oil change and was asking her mom for money. And her mom was basically like, "You have a job and you have a car. You have to pay for it yourself." And that was it. Mothers and daughters, we argue all the time. It is part of our love language. And to the point that Melissa's mom was like, "Hey, meet me tonight for a burger," right? Moms and daughters know that. That means nothing to argue in the morning and go have dinner at night. And so the officer dismissed it, didn't even file a report on it. And by the next day, when her friends were now alerted from her mother calling them all night, they started their own brigade of, making these posters and reaching out to people. So by Saturday morning, that's when I mentioned that I saw the flyer in our news station and I did the story. And so that's Saturday. By our reporting over the weekend, and I refer to her as Missy because her friends called her Missy. The police officers had apparently her car had been found. I believe it was around Sunday morning, and they just took her car, put it in, and they just took it. They didn't, and it was wet that morning, so they didn't process it as they shouldn't because it was wet. But the next day, the bowling alley realized that someone had turned in a set of keys that said Missy. And when the police came to get it, there was blood on it. And then that's when they went back to look at the spot in the parking lot where her car was found, and there was blood all over the parking lot.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes to go. The bottom line here is that 6 weeks later, her body is found. As this docuseries talks about, they found some possible leads. There's some possible serial killer connections. I advise anybody who's out there to watch it. As we wrap up here, Charlene, what did you learn? And what is the job of a journalist you think that you learned from this?
What did I learn? I learned that you have to lead with compassion and empathy and understanding, and you have a job to do. And sometimes that job is to do everything you can to help someone in need and to be accurate and to be factual and to connect with your viewers so they care as much as you do at the end of the day.
And Devon, let me ask you this question. You produce these, you direct these. I've been on the same side of the camera that Charlene has. What have you learned from these two cold cases that maybe changes your outlook on how you produce these or that you tell people these stories?
Yeah, it's a tremendous undertaking. When you go through these, when you see the men and women behind these cases, whether that be from the perspective of a journalist or whether that be from the perspective of the detectives at the time or the detectives now, you have a different appreciation for what goes into those cases, but also what those detectives experience and the weight of what they take home with them every day. And when you find good detectives, you know right away that those are the people that you want investigating your case if something were to happen to you. It deepens the amount of respect beyond question.
Cold cases have become a very big thing now in police departments. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office has a new cold case quarterly update. They do many postings on these. I've covered many of these. How has crime reporting changed? I'm still doing some of it, but not as much. What do you think, Charlene? How has it changed?
Well, I think that they utilize us more, right? They go to the media. They utilize social media. They lean to the community to help them. I think back in, when I was in Arkansas, it was very tight-lipped. They didn't really share a lot of information. And I think maybe we missed some opportunities there to get the word out faster. So I'm grateful today that law enforcement does tend to work with media in trying to utilize us to help get the word out.
It's called At Wit's End, The Hunt for a Killer, now streaming on Hulu. Charlene Shirk, Devon Parks, I thank you for being here today. And we're going to have a little more about Social Security turning 89 this year. Ann Schindler recently sat down with the Social Security Commissioner to discuss how the federal program plans to keep evolving to meet the needs of future generations.
Welcome back. The top executive at the Social Security Administration, Commissioner Martin O'Malley, came to Jacksonville to talk about the agency's challenges and the path ahead. He joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Ann. Thank you very, very much for having me.
Thanks for being here. So why are you in Jacksonville?
Because it's my job. Oh, Social Security has 1,211 offices all across the country that serve record high in terms of numbers of beneficiaries. And I learned from the people that are doing the job, and my job is to serve them better so that they can serve the public better. So that's why I'm here, and learning from the people here and making the changes necessary for us to meet the demand.
So we'll talk about some of the demand and the challenges, but when you travel around, do you notice anything distinct? Is there anything unusual or unique about Jacksonville itself in terms of needs or the Social Security benefits that people receive, or are they basically the same concerns around the country?
Well, it varies from one area to another. And in other words, we should one way to think about Social Security is that we are a large insurance company, and we have to process claims, pay benefits, and also make calculations based on a person's lifetime earnings. So, and every person in the United States at the moment of their birth receives a Social Security number that stays with them all through their working years into their retirement years, and for their family members and survivors even after they pass. So the workloads can vary from one area to another. In Florida and some other states, we see a lot more people coming in for Social Security numbers and cards or the letters necessary as they're working their way through our immigration process. And in other places, the mix can vary. But in essence, it's the same core program, same core rules, but they can be very different in terms of making sure they're applied correctly for an individual.
So people are always worried about the solvency of Social Security. Has the forecast improved at all? And is there a sell-by date? I mean, a year, if someone's born in that year, where there just isn't going to be Social Security anymore?
Yeah, let's unpack that. Social Security, so long as Americans work, Social Security will pay benefits. Period. Full stop. This is at its core an elegantly simple system that is a pay-as-you-go system. However, Congress every now and again has to readjust, assumptions about, life expectancy, the amount of revenues coming in compared to the benefits being paid out. And the good news is that this year, the forecast of when we would hit what is best described, I think, as a depletion date. It's not a bankruptcy or insolvency in the sense that we talk about that, although it's oftentimes mischaracterized that way. But it would be a reduction, if Congress weren't to act before then, of 17% in benefits that are paid out. So the good news this year is that thanks to better than expected job and wage growth, this year's actuarial report to the trustees pushed that depletion event forward and out and away from us another year rather than saying it was drawing closer. The bottom line, though, is
what is that? What is that? What is that calculation? What is that year?
That it's 2035 now rather than 2034, and I think it's, if memory serves me, July of 2035.
Gotcha.
In the past, when we've faced these things, famously, the story is anyway, Ann, right? And we all learn by way of stories. On the eve of the last time that this type of event was scheduled to have happened, forecast to have happened, famously, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, two Irish-American politicians from opposite parties, got together, had a beer, and fixed it for the next 75 years. That's the story. And we have built up a big trust fund reserve in anticipation of people my age, the baby boomers, reaching the point in their life when they're applying for their benefits that they worked their whole life to earn. But some changes happened, and I didn't know this until I caught this appointment. Changes happened after that so-called 75-year fix back in 1982 that advanced the depletion event. And And so that 75-year fix did not last as long as they thought it would. I asked our actuary, why is that? And he said, well, what we got wrong was that we did not anticipate changes to the tax code after that 75-year fix that shoved more of the income into the very highest top 4% of Americans and thereby took it out of the bracket that is taxed in the payroll tax by Social Security. And therefore, instead of capturing 90% of all earnings, they only captured 82% of dollars earned, again, because so much of it went to the highest earning Americans outside of the bracket. The way this works, as you may know, but a lot of Americans don't, is that all of us pay into Social Security up to the first $168,800 of our earnings. And then we stop. We pay, then the next $1,000, nothing comes out of that for FICA. So as a real and practical matter, that means that while most people pay into Social Security for the entire year, somebody like Warren Buffett would only pay into Social Security for, say, the first 20 seconds of the new year, and then they're done. So that's how Social Security works. It's a pay-as-you-go system. It will be there, and every now and again, Congress needs to figure out how to adjust, its levers in order to make sure it has ideally a 75-year runway, which is a long time. Most of us don't plan out 75 years, but this program does.
We've heard voices in the past and certainly currently talking about privatizing Social Security. What would that look like?
Golly, I don't know. I've met with a number of Congress people by now, probably close to 100 of them, in one-on-one meetings with them or their chiefs of staff. Nobody's brought that up with me, Ann. Maybe that was something that was talked about in the past under the second President Bush, but nobody has brought up the notion of privatizing Social Security. I think that, the fashion of that conversation has perhaps faded. Social Security, even with all of our polarization in our current politics, is one of the most trusted brands in the federal government among the people we serve, only second to, the Interior Department, Smokey the Bear, and the national parks. And 80% of Americans believe that Social Security should be strengthened and expanded, not weakened or privatized. So in a time of division and distrust, this is an area where Democrats and Republicans alike can find common ground, and I believe will, for that long-term fix. And in the meantime, though, the bigger crisis that's upon us is really the crisis in customer service. More than an hour-long wait times to get through on our 800 number, more Americans dying waiting for their initial disability determination than ever before in the history of our program. And it's because our staffing has been reduced to a 50-year low, even though our customers reach a new all-time high every day. So that's the crisis that's on the doorstep right now. I know that the solvency and those stories, oh my goodness, Social Security is going to go bankrupt, which, as I said, it's not. It's a pay-as-you-go program, and Social Security, so long as Americans work, Social Security will continue to pay benefits. But the crisis that I was asked to come up here and throw myself at, and that I travel around the country learning from our workers who are throwing themselves at ever-rising caseloads and customers coming through the door, is that customer service crisis. And so that's the fire we're putting out at present.
And so why is it that exists? I mean, given what you say is this strong bipartisan support for Social Security, the entity, and the service that it provides, why isn't there a concurrent understanding of staffing needs there or funding for that?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons behind it. I often ask myself that same question. Social Security for the last 10 years has rarely had a confirmed commissioner, so that man or woman can go into the halls of Congress and stand up for this agency. And as a result, I really don't think that most members of Congress, with some exceptions, most members of Congress don't want to cut Social Security or go home or tell their people they've cut Social Security, but it's more been a matter of disregard and assuming that the program can just continue to run. And we have not had our own budget hearing in 10 years.
Wow.
We are lumped in the appropriations process. Our budget is considered, to the extent it's ever considered, within a grouping of a subcommittee that they refer to as Labor H. So that is to say the Department of Labor, and the H stands for Health and Human Services. So we don't even, we don't even warrant an initial. It's Labor H and related agencies. And so Congress has allowed this agency, even as the customers continue to climb and climb and climb, to have its staffing reduced to a 50-year low. And to some in Congress, I suppose, when they say, well, what's the matter? We gave you level funding, but level funding, Ann, is not level staffing. When you have an agency like this that is all, human beings mostly, and yes, there's IT, and a lot of that is very old. It's human beings that are processing the claims for people. Our overhead to do that when we did it well was about 1.2% of benefits paid out. You compare that to another insurance company, Allstate is 19% overhead for benefits that they pay out, and Liberty Mutual, Liberty Biberty is 23% for benefits paid out. So I am making the case, and the good news is the other day in the Senate anyway, there was a proposal to increase Social Security's funding over last year by $500 million. President Biden has proposed a bigger allowance, and I say allowance because most of these dollars come out of the monies that all of us already paid in for the program. In other words, the same dollars that we paid in for our benefits are the same dollars that fund our overhead for the most part. So not to allow Social Security to stay at that 1.2% has really been the act over time that has put us into this customer service crisis. The good news is it can be fixed. The bad news is right now people face big waits when they try to get to us. When they get to us, I also hear many of our customers say, it was really good once I got to a person, but it is unacceptably long waits. Now, having said that, we've wrestled the wait time down from 42 minutes to 23 minutes on average on that 800 number. But some of the tougher challenges, like the disability determinations, which happen in 50 different state offices. I'll give you one just contrast. 4 years ago, we were able to do that for people in Florida in 129 days. Now it takes 353 days.
Wow.
Just for the initial disability determination. So there is no magic wand to solve that. We need, with the number of sub-applications growing and the volume of medical records now, we're shifting. We're taking people off of some workloads to put them on others. But at the end of the day, we need to get our staffing levels back up so that we can process these claims. And hey, and guess what? If you're in Florida and you get denied in that first round and you're waiting 353 days for that initial decision, your next route of appeal is to go back to that same Florida disability determination office with a different staffer who starts all over to give you a fresh review, which takes 369 days.
Wow.
So this is no way to run this program. And it is a stunning reversal compared to where this agency was just 10 years ago, or in that example, just 5 years ago, to be able to do it in 129 days, and now it takes 353. And the good news for Congress people who will be concerned, as we all should be, about the national debt. The good news is, if they allowed us to return to a healthier level of appropriate level of staffing, it doesn't need to contribute a single penny to the debt because it comes out of the dollars people already paid their whole lives as they work to earn their benefits.
Well, it's an education for all of us, and clearly you've got your task ahead of you, but we appreciate you making time for us today. Social Security Commissioner Martin O'Malley, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ann. Thanks very much.
And we'll be right back.
.org.
I'm Peter O'Dowd. Grief and loss, isolation, health problems, and loneliness. These are some of the factors driving depression and anxiety among senior citizens. Signs to watch for and how to help. That's next time on Here and Now.
Today at 1 on WJCT News 89.9.
We don't have to tell you that having children is expensive, but for some, those expenses begin far before a child is conceived. The fertility business is worth billions and growing. Just one IVF cycle in the U.S. can range from $12,000 to $30,000. The new Bloomberg podcast, Misconception, breaks down the fertility business from start to finish. That's next time on 1A.
Today starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
And we are back. A live recording of a podcast is the newest performance platform in the Jesse Ball DuPont Center's Moving the Margins Artist in Residency series. Joining me to talk about the event, which will focus on the state of media and culture in Jacksonville, is Al Peet, founder and CEO of the MPN Network. Thanks for being here, Al.
Thanks for having me.
For listeners who aren't sure about what the Moving the Margins might be, tell us more about that artist in residency program and how you got involved in it.
So, shouts out to the Jesse, downtown Jacks. They have the Moving the Margins, Shawana and Yaya. They run it, and it's an artist platform where, they can extend it from the artist's work that's in the gallery. But every month they have artists come in and they, talk about stuff or have poetry or anything just to expand the artist motion of Jacksonville. So, they asked me to be a part of it, so I was like, well, I'm going to do a state of the culture type of thing, just have conversations with the people that's in the community that I share spaces with, and just talk about some of the issues or just the good things or good or bad, indifferent, whatever, about things that's happening in the culture.
The great thing about Jacksonville, as I cover many events, is there are so many local artists, musicians, instrumentalists, vocalists who show up in public events and do a fantastic job to fill our world with music and art and conversation. So it shouldn't be too tough to find people to talk to in this and have other opinions brought forward, right?
Yeah. But there are a lot of people that are in their solitudes that I would like to touch. A lot of people might feel uncomfortable with having those conversations, or they might not be able to find those spaces to have those conversations at. And so I'm just trying to be that person to be able to offer that platform.
Now, is this podcast video or audio only?
It'll be live. So we're gonna do a live recording on Facebook, but it will be on YouTube once it's finished. So we gotta do the editing and stuff.
But these artists, are they in front of an audience, or is it just
it'll be in front of artists?
So that could be a little bit of nervousness for some people.
Well,
it's different than performing.
Yeah, you're correct. Because podcasting is, it's almost like it is an interview based type of sport that we're doing. So I don't think it would be as nervous because the people that are doing the podcast, which is Jamal Steele with Black Florida Podcast, he's a professional with it. He's an artist, so he knows to get those jitters out of him. So he'll be able to handle it.
And that the talent of any interviewer is to start a one-on-one conversation so the person you're talking to doesn't realize that other people are watching.
Right, correct. And it's just in the podcast state of form. It's no different from any of the traditional media that we're doing. So. And to add on, that's only one factor that we're doing. We're actually doing a panel as well. So we're going to have that conversation as well in person and live.
And that's some serious conversation. Once the audience gets into it, I'm guessing You got some questions coming from?
Absolutely, yeah. Just thinking about the state of media. We're going to talk about that. We have 2 people that are in the admin space, and then we have 2 artists that are in the admin space. So we have 4 people, artists talking to administrators and people that understand that, that's always the mystery, like, why did they do this and why did they do that? So we're having those conversations to kind of break the ice so people can kind of understand where everybody sits at with the hopes to grow and to empower and engage.
Yeah, many of us say that's above my pay grade when they're asked a question. Well, now those above the pay grade, your pay grade, are there to answer the question.
Yeah, it's a level ground, that's all.
So let's talk more about this evening. When is this? Where is this live podcast? Where can someone join in to watch, to listen, to enjoy?
So it's 6 to 9 tomorrow at the Jesse, and it's free. So if you would like to come down there and check it out, like I stated, we will have a live podcast recording. We'll have a panel discussion, and we'll also be presenting the MPN app. So it's a couple things that's going on, but it'll be there. And then we'll be live on Facebook on the MPN network. We'll be on Instagram as well, kind of periodically, but it'll be on the MPN management YouTube, not YouTube page, Instagram page. And so, yeah.
So you've got some esteemed panelists. You've got Carla Michelli from Carla Michelli Media. We've got El Draco 904, The Record, Troy McNair, and young OG Robbie. So what are those people bringing to the table, I guess?
So you have Troy McNair. He has a management group. He's Think Bold Conference, which is a very prominent conference here in Jacksonville, Florida. The 3rd year is coming up next year. So it's good to get his expertise in festivals and conferences and how artists should be involved in that. Then you have Carla, that's part of the media, that does very great at storytelling. She just finished doing the Lift Your Voice and Sing exhibit. Then you have El Draco and Robbie. Both of those are like respectful artists, but at the same time, too, they're being very innovative in the creative director space. So I want to bring them in and just have that conversation and bring their expertise about how they handle things and how it can kind of coincide with everybody else's platforms.
So moving the margins, State of the Culture is 6 to 9 p.m. at the Jesse, downtown, the old library, right?
The old library.
And what should people know? Just in the last 30 seconds, what should people know when they get there?
Think of it as a town hall meeting, just having a conversation with the community and seeing what their wants and their needs are from a creative space, and just want to be able to have those conversations openly, because I don't think we have as much conversations about the state of certain things when it comes to artists, when it comes to administrative, when it comes to media, how they cover us and all of the things.
And it's controlled two-way. They can talk from the audience.
Absolutely.
All right. This is wonderful. Well, that's our program here. I want to thank Al Pete for being here once again. We encourage your feedback and suggestions. You can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. If you missed anything, catch our rebroadcast at 8 tonight, or find the entire archive at WJCT.org. You can see the video archive at the WJCT YouTube page. Executive producer, First Coast Connect, David Luckin. Producer, Stacey Bennett. Directed by Brady Corum. Jamie Valet is our associate producer, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Tomorrow, our panel of media mavens talking about the week's biggest headlines. I'm Dan Scanlon. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
20 minutes of reading a day paves the way to success. And remember, the reading doesn't have to be all at once. Find small moments throughout the day to read together. They all add up to 20. For more information, readjacks.org.